What is up, Healthcare Squad? Logan here with Healthcare Stress Relief, and in this video we're going to be covering 5 tips to help you retire early as a nurse. There is a movement going around called the FIRE movement. It stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And in this video I meet on a Zoom call with my friend Anthony. He is the owner of the firenurse.com, and he particularly specializes in helping nurses and healthcare workers plan and implement a strategy to retire early. We as nurses work really hard. I personally had coworkers who were working into their 70s just because they weren't financially stable and didn't make the right decisions early on in their life. So this video is really important if you want to retire early. I personally think all healthcare workers deserve it. You just have to implement a strategy. So watch the video to the end, implement the steps, and I'll see you in retirement. What is up, Healthcare Squad? Logan here with Healthcare Stress Relief. And in this video, we have another special guest, Anthony Guglielmo, the Italian stallion, and he is the FIRE nurse. If you guys don't know what FIRE is, we're going to talk about this collaboration. Let me get this on gallery. This collaboration is to help healthcare workers, particularly with finances. And Anthony is a nurse practitioner, and he's on his own journey of achieving retirement at a very young age. You said 42 is your plan, right?
That's the plan.
Yeah. And so he's done a lot of studying, a lot of work, and he now has his own business, the FIRE Nurse. And so we're having him on today to discuss how you as a nurse can follow in his footsteps and potentially retire early, because we know many of you are burning out and you do not want to be a burnt out nurse at 55, 60, 65 years old waiting for your retirement. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on, Logan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me what got you into the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say about 8 years ago, between 8 and 10 years ago, I started reading up about personal finance, just independence, and then moved on to the financial independence, reading blogs like Mr. Money Mustache and JL Collins and some of the big names out there in financial independence. So after I started getting my finances down, because they weren't the best when I first started off, became really interested in pursuing this movement, which is called FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early, which allows you to retire in a fraction of the time just by making small sacrifices in the beginning, saving here and there, taking years off your retirement age just by tiny little changes. So I became intrigued by it. Mr. Money Mustache retired in his early 30s. He left his engineering job. He started in his early 20s, worked for 10 years. He was able to retire, built a successful business off of that on top of it, but he didn't need to. He was living off just investments, essentially, rather than following the typical American habit, you could say, of just spending all your money, living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, over 60% of Americans live that way. It's crazy.
Yeah. And do you want to go ahead and fill them in? We were talking before the call about how he's working with nurses who, when I was a nurse working in the ICU in California, I know it's not the same for every state, but I was making over 6 figures as a 24-year-old. And I noticed a lot of my coworkers, they were living paycheck to paycheck and they were making more than me. Some of them were making $200,000 and they had a mortgage. They had all these nice cars. They're telling me to buy a new car. And what you said earlier too was there are doctors who marry other doctors. They could probably save up millions of dollars, but they are spending all their money on Mercedes, Porsches, and new houses, right?
Exactly. McMansions, whatever, just keeping up with the Joneses, the American lifestyle. Yeah. So I've noticed that to be a big problem. I mean, in America in general, but I found that nurses particularly don't have really good financial literacy. We don't learn it in school. And I've just seen nurses, their goal is to buy a really nice car, show up in a BMW M3 and have a really nice house. But it's worth nothing if you're living paycheck to paycheck. You could, it's not worth anything because what's your future? Do you want to work like you were
Mm,
saying, your whole story about how you were getting sick because of the stress? Is that worth it? I mean, the key to financial independence is getting out of that rat
yeah.
race and being able to do things on your terms. You're you're in an amazing place right now. And just because you stop working in your traditional role doesn't mean you're going to stop working completely, but you can pursue a passion and not worry about having that paycheck. So I really wanted to help other nurses and other healthcare professionals, allied health PAs and NPs and physical therapists, all of these people who I found not as many have that financial literacy to be able to, one, get a good financial basis, get a good financial grounding where they can get to control their finances and then pursue, if they'd like, financial independence and retire early.
Amazing. So yeah, we've discussed, and we're going to talk about the starters pack for the fire movement. So if you are a nurse and you have no idea what we're talking about, this is for you. If you've been reading about the fire movement or you're a veteran, this is still going to be good to make sure you're on the right path. So you want to go ahead and give them number one?
Yeah, so absolutely. Number one, when you're starting out, really in any personal finance endeavor, if you're trying to establish a base, you need a budget. So this is the ground base. If you don't have a budget, you're not going to be able to pursue fire. So it's really a personal finance basic. It's at the root of everything in personal finance. Even at high income levels, you still need a budget to know where your money's going, allocating it to the investments, allocating it to your basic expenses. So the budget is definitely number one.
And the biggest, easiest way to explain this to nurses is pretty much you want more saving for you, paying yourself, than is going out, right?
Absolutely. So there's non-discretionary expenses and discretionary expenses. You separate those up. So pretty much things that you absolutely need, essentials and non-essentials. So those are the non-discretionary and discretionary expenses. So obviously you need to eat, you need transportation, you need a place to live, you need clothes, things like that. Whereas discretionary expenses, saying going out to dinner, buying a nice vehicle, and anything that you don't need to survive. And really, with budgeting, you really need, as we'll get to as we start talking a little bit about investments, you have to pay yourself back first. If you don't do that, you'll never be able to, it's a hamster wheel. You're just going to spend and earn, spend and earn, spend and earn, not knowing where your money's going. And you're going to end up working. I see people in their 70s and 80s now still working. I saw nurses on the floor working in their 70s. I mean, and that's backbreaking work,
Yeah.
still boosting patients, and it's really difficult. So I really want to help people try to get out of that, but budget's essential.
And what would you say for the person who doesn't have any, like, even for me, I've budgeted in the past, but I'm not a fan of it.
All right.
What is the easiest way for some people? Is it using an app like Mint, or is it just good old fashioned pen and paper, figuring out your own way?
I think everyone's different as to what they're like. What they would like. I personally have used Personal Capital, which is similar to Mint. Those are two great programs. They're free. They aggregate all of your bank accounts, all of your investments, put them all in one place, and allow you to allocate money. Mint is a little bit better for that. And they're both free, which is really nice. There's another one a lot of people swear by in the financial independence community and in personal finance in general, called You Need a Budget, YNAB. You pay a monthly fee. It helps. It also aggregates and it helps you put your money into buckets: food, eating out, transportation. And then you can put sub buckets in your discretionary expenses like traveling, and it really allows you to see how much you have. It's based on the envelope method, where in the past you used to say, okay, this is my money for eating out, put in a little envelope. When it runs out, that's all you have for the month. That's the envelope method, which is an older method. It still works. And these methods allow you to develop the discipline to follow your budget. And once you start getting into it, it becomes a lot easier. People say it's so difficult in the beginning because they're not used to it. They just say, I'm going to pull out my credit card and buy whatever I want without thinking about the repercussions of their purchases. And I feel that getting into the budget, it's hard to start with, but it makes it so easy when you download one of these apps. I've done Excel spreadsheets too. I'm a spreadsheet guy. I'm obviously I love this stuff. So I make my spreadsheets and update those all the time. But I also really like those Mint, like you said, or personal finance, which are great for developing a budget.
Awesome. Number two.
So number two is you need to pay down, or I'm sorry, develop your emergency fund. So the emergency fund is a really important aspect in personal finance. Now, it may be foreign to many people. They're used to just having money and just spending it whenever they want. Now, what is someone to do when they live paycheck to paycheck and they're given a slip? You're fired or you're being laid off. I'm sorry. Yeah, there's unemployment. You might be able to collect unemployment. Or what if you need to leave a job because you get sick and you're not able to, FMLA runs out or whatever. There are contingencies for, you could probably come up with any contingency in your head. Oh, but I could do this or that. Every single person needs an emergency fund. You have to have this because this could derail you completely. It could cause you to go bankrupt and everyone could say, oh, it's not going to happen to me. My job's so stable. I mean, we saw in this pandemic, a lot of healthcare providers lost their jobs. I know a lot of providers, NPs, PAs, physicians, a lot of them lost their jobs. Nurses, in particular, specialties that weren't, in the hospital, they were losing jobs. So nothing is guaranteed in life. So it's really important to develop a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, which is 3 to 6 months of your bare minimum expenses that would allow you to live for that time period. And if you work on, like, most nurses do have a W-2 income, but if you're working as in a business, it's more recommended even have 9 to 12 months emergency fund where your income is variable every month. If you do per diem, or
Really, 9 to 12 months.
If you're in, if you have a variable monthly income, if you're an entrepreneur, and unless you have a very, very steady income every month, if it's up and down, the experts recommend, 9 months, 9 to 12. But most people completely fine with 3 to 6.
Cool. I know a lot of entrepreneurs that are not at 9 months. they're gonna figure it out. I know that.
Yeah.
Okay, number three.
All right. So number three is contributing the absolute bare minimum to get your retirement plan match from your employer. So most employers have a retirement plan. Generally, what they have is a 401k or a 403b, and they'll say, if you contribute 6% of your income, we will give you for free 3%. We'll deposit it into your IRA account. All you have to do is contribute 6%. In the beginning, when I first started working, when I was like, I don't remember when I graduated school, I was like 21, 22. I didn't start doing that. I was like, who needs to put in that? And that's the biggest mistake you could make. The amount of money you can make with compounding, and that is absolutely unbelievable. Over a decade, and it just compounds and compounds. That's where real wealth is made. So the first thing you want to do, though, is not leave the money on the table. That's the expression. Do not leave that money on the table. That's part of your compensation. When the employer gives you a job and they say, okay, we're going to pay you X number of dollars per hour or per year if you're on a salary, that's all worked in there, that you're going to take that 3%, or sometimes employers offer 4% even of that's just those thousands of dollars. That's just part of your compensation package. You're just throwing it in the garbage if you don't take advantage of it. So I really recommend everyone, it's so important after you have that minimum emergency fund to start taking advantage of that minimum amount to get the full employer match.
Right. I had a question on that. So
yeah,
I think in California, I don't know if it differs by state, but the max is like $18,000 that you can contribute into your retirement fund.
Yes. Yeah.
So but is it 18,000 and then a 3% on top of that, or is it they will cap it out before, so you don't have to be contributing that 3%?
So the cap now, it's not state-based, it's federal government. It's $19,500 a year. They just updated again for 21. It didn't go up. So that's the maximum you can put into a 401k account. Mm-hmm. What I'm talking about here, when I say the match, I'm just saying the match on your salary. So I mean, so if say you made $100,000 a year, to keep it simple, say you needed to put in 6% and they'll give you 4%, they'll give you $4,000 and they'll just deposit it into that account. You're allowed to contribute another $15,500 beyond that. You're not getting a match, but most of these people who are just starting out in personal finance, they're going to have some sort of debt on their personal finance journey.
Yeah.
So on their journey to FIRE, they're really going to start here, just take the match, and then they're going to move on to the next step before maxing out that 401k.
And for nurses who are going into the profession, I
Mhm.
think this happened with my hospital. I didn't really understand the contract and they weren't giving that good of benefits. So what you want to make sure they give you 3% when you start?
3% is an industry
Pretty standard,
standard.
right? Okay.
Some give 4. I've seen 2. It all depends on the situation, but I'd say if you're working for a hospital, they're going to give you 3 or 4%. Some may even give you more. Some might give you 5%.
Cool.
So definitely don't take anything less than 3%. That's an industry standard for match.
Okay. And then number 4.
And then number 4 is debt. You have to pay down high interest debts. So these are credit card debts, sometimes student loan debts, depending on when you started school. You might have had a debt at 7 or 8% APR, or even higher. That's fairly high. Credit card debt, you're talking 15, 20, 25%, 30%. If you have poor credit, it could be higher. So those are absolute emergencies. That's has to be paid down as soon as possible. The second your minimum employer match is met, everything needs to be thrown at the debt besides your minimum living expenses. I mean, you need a place to live, get a roommate, commute, got to do whatever you have to do, but reduce your expenses, the bare minimum, get the match, and start paying down the high interest debt. It's huge. I mean, if you carry unnecessary consumer debt, you can extend your working career by 20 years or even more, just because of the effect. It has the opposite effect of the compounding working in your benefit. When you invest, it's the opposite. They're taking from you and taking more and more and more, instead of you building up more and more money in the stock market or in your investments. So debt, I tell people, is an absolute emergency. It has to be getting rid of. You should not be buying a new car when you have credit card debt, or really anything like that, because that will completely derail your efforts. You're going to end up working, if you live that lifestyle, till you're 70 or 80.
And do you advise like the debt snowball that Dave Ramsey would advocate for, or do you advise just paying off higher? It depends on the client.
It depends on the client and it depends on their motivation. So you have the avalanche, and then you have the snowball. The snowball will get you a little bit more motivated, like Dave Ramsey says. But the avalanche is more efficient because you're paying down higher interest, rather than saying, oh, making a little personal victory and paying off the smaller balance. You're better off in the long run if you have that motivation to pay off the higher interest debts first, because that's what's really killing you. That's where you're bleeding a lot of the money.
Yeah, I just did the avalanche.
The avalanche is the best. If you go online, you can do the calculator and you can see how much more you would pay using each method. There's a lot of websites out there, FIRE, for avalanche method versus snowball method, and it'll tell you exactly how much time you need to pay down based on, say you want to throw an extra $2,000 a month at, or $1,000 a month. It'll tell you exactly how much you'll save each way, but maximize that payment.
Okay. And then the other thing I wanted to clarify was you have debt and
Yep.
you also are contributing to your 401k. What decision do you make? Because some people would say, oh, just pay off the debt first. Some people would say, keep the money in the 401k because it's going to give you more money in the long run. What do you advise there?
So, as I mentioned, I think it's really important to give the bare minimum to your employer match to get that full match. If you need to contribute 6% to get 3%, you contribute the 6%. You're literally throwing money in the garbage if you don't take advantage of that match, because, like I said, that's part of the employer total compensation package that they're offering you. And that money is going to go into an investment account. And I talk a lot about, I'm going to be talking about, my blog, and you even hear about choices for investments, where to put them so you can grow. But the market, you could get 8 to 10% return on the market. So you're losing out on that if you don't contribute that money. And that's free money. It's here's a gift of $3,000. And on top of it, it's building up. So even if you have a lot of consumer debt, at least get the minimum amount, at least meet that match. And then say, okay, I'm not going to go out to eat this month. I'm not going to go to the movies. I'm not going to, pursue this expensive hobby. I'm going to cut all this out, everything, cut until, and just throw everything you can at those loans.
Cool. And number five?
So then number five is going to be maximizing your contributions to your IRAs or your retirement accounts so there's two types of retirement accounts. We have the 401k/403b, which is what most people are familiar with, the one that you get your match with the $19,500 annual contribution limit. And then there's a Roth IRA, which has a $6,000 annual contribution limit. So the difference between a Roth and a 401k is the 401k monies come out pre-tax. So before the IRS takes their cut, the employer will pull that out of your paycheck, put it right in your brokerage account, and allow you to invest it and do whatever you want with it. The money grows tax-free. And then when you remove the money, you pay taxes on it, with the assumption that when you're retired, your salary is going to be lower. You're not going to be working. So it puts you into a lower tax bracket. So it's tax efficient. A Roth IRA is different. You're taxed on the money and then you contribute to the account. The money grows tax-free and then you can remove it without paying tax on it because you already paid tax in the beginning. So it is more beneficial if you think you're going to be paying more tax during retirement, which can occur in some circumstances, but they're both tax efficient but they both have benefits, but eventually you're going to want to really max out both of them. So depending on your employer's 401k funds, that's how you're going to make your decision is whether you're going to put the money in the Roth IRA or you're going to, after you make the minimum contribution, obviously on the 401k to get the match, or if you're going to put the rest of the money up to the 19,500 per year in your 401k. So we look at expense ratios. So some employers, most of them have good funds, seeing expense ratios of less than 0.1. We're talking 0.05, 0.09. Even some of the managed funds are, 0.1. As you start getting higher expense ratios, that starts eating into your profits. Some of these funds have 1%, 2% expense ratios. That's huge. That's taking full percentage points off your profits just for actively managing. And at the end of the day, 1% of people beat the market. You're much better just going right into an index fund. So this is getting a little more complicated with fund selection, but index funds are where you want to be. Now, say you do have good funds available in your 401k brokerage account with your employer, I usually recommend, depending on your income level. Now, this is very, it's more personalized, whether you're going to max out the Roth or you're maxing out the 401k. Generally, I say the 401k, but as you start making higher income levels, it could make sense to put in the Roth. But at that point, you're going to be maxing out both anyways, if you're going to be firing. So the goal is to be able to max both of these out. And as you continue working on moving along in your fire path, there are other options available, especially if you have your own business, if you're an entrepreneur. There's SEP IRAs, there's self-directed IRAs. They'll let you defer over 50,000 tax before taxes, but those are really advanced techniques, and we're talking basics here. So we're going to stick with the 401k/403b and the Roth IRA. And on my blog, I kind of talk a little bit more about the differences. We can discuss income levels and stuff like that, because that's going to determine if you can't max out both, you want to effectively be able to put your money in the right bracket, and that is highly dependent on your tax situation and your income.
And one thing I wanted to touch on was with the FIRE movement, the biggest transition you have to make is I'm going to become free, but I'm going to sacrifice luxury, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So FIRE is about making sacrifices now in order to gain freedom for the rest of your life, because you're taking advantage of compound interest. Starting now, you're going to be able to build a huge nest egg and just live off of that without needing to work. You'll literally be able to just live off your investments, and there's ways to take money out of investment accounts before 55, and there's ways around it. So you can live off your investments. without having to work. You could pursue a hobby, you could pursue a passion like you're doing, teaching people about stress and getting out of that environment that if it's hurting you. So, I think it's really important to have this, to have that ability to be able to walk away from a job, because kind of like what your blog and your business and your whole pursuit here is touching on, you don't want to let your job affect your mental health. And if it is affecting your mental health, being financially independent allows you to just walk away. So, a lot of people will just live paycheck to paycheck, because they want to get this nice car. They want $100,000 car and they want $1 million house. And you look, some of the people that I look to, we look at Warren Buffett. He drives an old Cadillac. He's famous for driving this old Toyota Corolla. He goes out to breakfast at McDonald's. You look at Scott Zuckerberg over at Facebook. He drives a $30,000 Acura. So, I mean, there's people out there with a lot more money than some of these people have, physicians, nurses, whatever their position is. I don't care if they're making $200,000, $100,000, $60,000, $1 million a year. There's people out there with billions of dollars driving a $30,000 car. So the sacrifices that you make now will allow you to achieve so much more in life. It'll allow you to be 40 years old or 45 years old and be able to live out the rest of your life, to travel, to pursue passions, instead of just slaving away at a 9 to 5 just so you can maintain an appearance in front of other people. So I think it's a super important concept.
Yeah, it's forward thinking, which is the people who usually forward think and build out their dream reality, they manifest it. But when you're worried about a seat warmer in your Mercedes car that costs an extra $1,000, you're not really worried about your future, unless you're bringing in 500,000 and you're saving all of that and putting it into your retirement fund. But
exactly.
Cool, Anthony. Thank you so much for coming on and giving the people what they want. So
no, it's been a pleasure, and I hope you guys have benefited from this. And if you guys want to check out my blog, thefirenurse.com, we've got a lot of free information on there, resources, and I just want to get my message out there and help as many nurses and healthcare professionals as possible to achieve FIRE, because really there wasn't a lot of information out there. I saw a lot of other blogs. There's Physician on Fire, there's all these other FIRE blogs, but no one was focusing on nurses, and who seem to have a lot less financial literacy for some reason. So it's time for that to change. So check out my blog.
Alrighty, thank you so much. If you liked this video, go ahead and check out this video over here with my friend Tom Peabody. He is a financial expert for nurses. If you want to learn more about finances, watch this video. If you're getting a lot of money as a nurse, you want to know how to spend it, invest it, so you can have a more fruitful life. Enjoy.